Hey everyone, today we're going to take a look at the Tuf Gaming B850 BTF Wi-Fi White. This board is not out yet, but it will be released shortly, I would say within the next 2 to 3 weeks, maybe a little sooner than that, in North America. This is actually Asus's first AMD BTF board. There have been other ones available from other vendors, such as Aorus or primarily just Aorus. And I think there's an MSI one, but those have not been available in the United States or North America region. So with that said, let's get started. For those of you not aware what BTF is called Back to the Future, which is essentially Asus's version of having connectors on the back. I'll show you that once the board is unboxed. Right away, guys, I want you to know this is a media sample. It is not a retail unit, so the packaging is not going to be as nice as the one you're going to get. But here we go. We have the antenna out the box, and we have the two SATA cables, black. And I kind of wish they would have white SATA cables, but I understand I don't think they have white ones. But let's just get the board out, and we'll take a look at what else is included. Price-wise, this board is going to be coming in at around $250. You can kind of see it on Amazon already. I'll put the link in the description. So given the price point, you're not going to get all the candies, and I think it's fair to not expect that many candies given the mid 200 price point. You get some M2 accessories, a quick start guide, and some stickers at the bottom. Just keep that in mind when you're going through the box, that there is some stuff at the bottom. Let's just quickly get the board out of the anti-static bag here, and we'll get started. Now that we have the board out, let's take a closer look. First, there is going to be a warning here for the quick release latch. Pull from the back, don't pull from the front. They've actually never managed to scratch one in testing over thousands of removal. So for the one guy that probably did it, I really don't know how you managed to do that unless you're just tugging from the front extremely hard. Okay. Moving on, the idea of these design boards should be fairly familiar to the current Tuf series. For example, I'm going to pull out here a Z890 Tuf Gaming, right? And you'll notice that it kind of carries the same design. Same goes for the black versions of these boards, but you'll notice right away that the PCB on the Tuf here is more silverish, and the PCB on the AMD one here is more white. In comparison to the Apex Z890, Strix B850, Strix B650, those all have a PCB that is closer to this grayish white than this very pure white that I have over here. Unfortunately, I don't have those boards on hand at the moment, so I can't show you, but I can tell you that just from my experience so far, this is the whitest looking board I've seen come out of Asus. Okay, so once again, let's quickly go over what is BTF on the back, and then we'll move on to the I/O and what is under these covers here. For those of you that are not aware, BTF 1.0 introduced last year, I think it might have been even before that, introduced boards where all the connectors are on the back, like so. So you have all your fan, ARGB all on the back. Most cases these days do support BTF from Lanley. Some of the Asus cases that have come out since, as well as a lot of your favorite case makers like Phanteks, which will use a built-in Phanteks case for this board. However, it seems like Fractal Design is one of the few companies that's currently not supporting it. I'm not too sure why, but it is what it is. Right away, for those of you that are familiar with the BTF product, you'll notice that for Z790 Tuf BTF, which I did make a video of on this channel, they had 3 8-pins that you could use here, in addition to the 16-pin. It seems like now they've just stuck with the 16-pin, which is fine. This board, moving to the front here, you'll notice does have a slot for your graphics card to draw power from. Obviously, you need a BTF compatible GPU if you want to use this. This is rated for 600 watts, just like on all the other BTF boards from Asus. I'll just bring in here, for example, the Z890 Hero. This also has that, you can see, and as well as all the connectors on the back. This build is actually going into a build that is going to be extremely cool, but I can't talk about it right now. But rest assured, you guys will see that everywhere very shortly. Okay, so with that said, this is actually essentially BTF 2.0. Okay, right now the only GPUs that are available are the 40 series, 4090 BTF. Obviously, these are discontinued cards, and the 4070 Ti Super Tough BTF. But soon we will have the 5070 Ti Tough BTF and the 5090 Astral BTF. Now, for those of you wondering, I'll put some photos up on BTF 2.5. Essentially the new GPUs, what they've done is they've made a connector that sits in between the card and this connector, and it's recessed on the card, and that allows you to use this while maintaining a 16 pin on the card. Some folks either just preferred the cables or were concerned about the resale value, that you would need a BTF board with the GPU. The new 2.5 BTF cards essentially resolve that issue. Now, moving on to the rear, we'll take a look at the I/O. You have HDMI, DisplayPort, two 10 gigabit USBs, two regular USB 2.0s, a 2.5 gigabyte LAN, 20 gigabit USB-C, 10 gigabit USB, and then 4 more 5 gigabits, your Wi-Fi 7, flashback button, and an LED light for that, and your onboard audio. This, from a $250 price point, is pretty good. Like I said, given the price, I wouldn't expect too much more than that. All right, so the only connector you will have in the front, though, is the CPU fan. Reason being is, I think for most folks with an air cooler, it might be a little difficult for you to route your main fan wire, through the back if you can't reach and you don't have an extension, etc. That's why that's there. Also, you'll notice that you do have an M2 slot here. This is going to be a Gen 5 M2 slot, and two more on the bottom here. If I remove these covers, these two are going to be Gen 4, okay? And in terms of the expansion slots, you will have a Gen 4 X1 for something like a capture card, sound card, and then you'll have this slot, which, while it looks like X16, if we look at the back, you'll notice that it is only wired to be X4, okay? So, what sacrifices do you have to make to populate these two M2s? That would be highly dependent on your CPU, but I believe if you're using a pretty popular Ryzen CPU, given that this is already X4, one of these probably does share with this, so it is most likely one of these is done by the PCH, that you will not actually have to make any sacrifices. But unfortunately, at this time, there is no manual for this board because it's not released. So I cannot guarantee you that, but based off common sense and my speculation, that would be probably the case. So obviously this one is a Gen 5 and that feeds into your CPU. Same goes for the top M2. Now, unlike the other boards, this M2 does somehow, for some reason, click in on this side. Yeah, it's a little bit interesting. It's not on the back, it's on the front. But yeah, I'll put that back in later. But with that said, let's get this into a build so we can kind of see it in action. All right, so here we have the demo build, essentially, with the board installed. This brings the AMD lineup, as I was saying earlier, to BTF for Asus. The card itself, obviously, is a 4070 Ti Super. It is not a Radeon. They did show off a Radeon Tough at CES. Not a Radeon Tough, but a Radeon BTF Tough at CES this year for the 7900 XTX. It was never released, so hopefully they might release it moving forward for the 9070 XT. But that really depends on how popular the Radeon cards are going to sell. With that said, this kind of floating look with no wires, just something I did with the Z790 BTF as well when I had that last year. You can see here, you do not see any cables, no tubes at all whatsoever. Part of that is thanks to the CPU block, which is a Bitspower Revo. This block is what they call a stealth block. It originally came out from Modding Cafe, and they licensed his IP essentially to recreate these blocks. For those of you that are not familiar with how these blocks work, essentially the water is going through the mounting post of the block itself. Once I show you guys the back of the case, you're going to kind of have a better idea how that works. For those of you that know how this works, you can see these blocks are extremely cool. With that said, this is not the latest 5000 series BTF. You can always tell because on the 5000 BTF, you will have the 16 pin on the GPU still. They'll probably have a cover. Otherwise, it's going to look really awkward to have an open connector that's not connected. So This is the 4070 Ti Super from last year. The 5070 Ti Super Tuf is going to be available. That's going to come in white. Unfortunately, I don't have one on hand at the moment, so I couldn't use that for this purpose. But I just want to quickly show you guys. I know I'm going to get questions about the screen on the back, and I'll also tell you how I made it fairly clean aside from the RGB cable. I have a 360 radiator on top. You obviously do not see anything connected to it, and I'll show you guys how I did that along with the screen, and we'll move on to the back. So you're going to have to excuse the reflection on the screen itself from the LED on the block. But this screen is a 2.8-inch screen that connects directly to USB. It's going to run that software, Terzix, or you can run the Python one that's open source on GitHub. This is the same software that Lianli uses for their screens and all their upcoming screens on their cases. Essentially, I guess they just had them as a screen provider. You can buy these screens on their own. This is a 2.8-inch I bought off AliExpress. I just have it showing some basic stats. I think the classic clock look kind of cool. It doesn't come in this mount. There's a mount I designed and quickly 3D printed just so I could mount it on the rear 120 and kind of clean up those holes. I think it kind of matches and it looks kind of classy, right? But right above that, you'll see that there is a white kind of layer here. Well, I want to call it piece. It's not perfect. It's not perfectly clean because I kind of really rushed this. I spent about less than 2 hours on this build. So this piece is actually hiding where you would normally see the fittings. So otherwise you would see fittings from the radiator on top, but because I printed and put this piece here, you're not going to see anything. So that kind of helps me hide that whole top tubing part. Taking a look at the not so magical rear compared to the front, of course, all the wirings in the back, as you can see, because this is a back connect board. For those of you that have not seen the stealth block before, this is the actual rear of the stealth block. And because I have all these bubbles flowing through still, you can actually see the bubbles flowing through. You see the water coming from the radiator, going into the post, coming out of the post, coming down here, coming all the way back down to the pump res down there. Actually, let me remove this cover so you guys get a better look at the pump res. So as I was saying, that is the Barrow mini res DDC that I'm using. It is using a thin form DDC, which is the same as you would find on the CR Slim reservoirs from Bitspower. I could have used the 120 FLT, 80mm FLT, or the equivalent from Bitspower, but I felt that this was just super easy because it lays flat. It has such a giant surface area on one side. You could put a 3M adhesive, lay it down. It will not cause vibration noises. It will not, act up. It's just perfect, especially useful for SFX builds, because I think most people do use a 120 or 80mm in SFX. This is even smaller than that, and it's flatter than that in terms of height. So you can put it in more kind of niche scenarios. So that pretty much wraps it up for this video. This board should come out, I'm going to say, in the next 2 to 3 weeks. You can find it on Amazon already. I'll put the link on the bottom. It says currently unavailable, arriving, I think, late this month or early next month, but obviously very soon. In terms of the GPU, the 5070 Ti Super BTF, I do believe there are some resellers in Europe that may have them on hand. I did not even see them available in Taipei, so I don't know when that's coming to North America. I would probably guess maybe later Q3, much like the rest of the BTF series for Astral, the X870 Hero BTF, which I'll put a photo up if you guys didn't see that. I did show it at Computex this year in my walk around video. So, with that said, thanks for watching, stay safe, and take care.